The White House has requested $3.7 billion to deal with the border crisis. A significant portion of that money, the administration says, would go into clearing up a court backlog, preventing thousands of migrant children from being returned to their countries. But is that really where the money would be going? In this morning's reality check, we dig into the numbers.
The fury is palpable and growing with each arrival of buses filled with migrant children and families.
Use the word illegal aliens. They came across here illegally.
Looking to calm tensions and solve a crisis, the Obama administration wrote this, a letter to House Speaker John Boehner asking the Congress for, quote, $3.7 billion to comprehensively address this urgent humanitarian situation. But what will the money actually be used for? Press Secretary Josh Earnest says most of it will go toward humanely housing undocumented immigrants trying to enter the country and ensuring them a day in court.
That is what a large chunk of this funding would be devoted toward. That's hiring judges, ICE prosecutors and asylum officials who could address the backlog that has cropped up in recent months.
We were left to figure out what the president and his press secretary mean by a large chunk. So instead of using the White House fact sheet that cobbles together money by the department receiving it, which is kind of confusing, we created 4 basic categories and counted up the billions for ourselves. The first, temporary detainment, has by far the biggest pot, $2.5 billion. The funds go toward improving holding facilities for a wave of new migrants and beefing up transportation and housing services. A distant second, border enforcement, would get nearly $800 million and goes toward increasing surveillance and expanding border security teams. Foreign aid is tagged for $300 million. That's money meant to reintegrate migrants living in violent countries like Guatemala, stamp out gang violence, and educate those populations on the dangers of trying to sneak into the U.S. Lastly, the $64 million question. How much of the $3.7 billion will be spent on the judicial process the White House talks about? Well, $64 million. For hiring judges to alleviate the backlog of cases and legal representation for migrants. This last area is critical, says Priya Murthy, an immigrants' rights advocate who works for the Bay Area group Siren, and she fears it's getting shortchanged.
Given that many of these children may have valid asylum claims, which are very complicated, very time-consuming, and require a lot of legal expertise, it's imperative that they have lawyers who help represent them and judges who are able to adequately hear their case.
And Siren says that it is very happy about the billions of dollars that would go to providing more humane living conditions for undocumented migrants. But spending most of the money to clear up the jammed court situation, well, the reality is that less than 2% of those funds would actually go to judges and legal representation, making that claim wrong. Moving on, some of San Francisco's high-end retailers suffered major losses yesterday after a construction crew broke a water main just off of Union Square.